are back. Welcome back everyone. I'm Nick and this is Swiftful Thinking. In this video, we're looking at drawing custom curves on our custom shapes. So in the last video, we did custom shapes, so we only drew straight lines. And that's great, that's easy, but sometimes your custom shape actually needs a curve or an arc. And in order to do that, we need some really unique custom code. So because curves and arcs can be a little tricky to implement, I wanted to make them their own video. So in this video, we're going to start by implementing arcs, which is basically just a regular symmetrical curve. And then we're going to jump into quad curves, which are a little more advanced and possibly more useful because they can connect 2 points and create an automatic curve between those 2 points. And again, if you're just joining, I highly recommend watching the previous video in this series before this one, because in that video, I covered just the basics on how to create custom shapes. And in this one, we're strictly focusing on the curves within those shapes. And I'll also throw out there that the next video in this series is going to cover how to animate these custom shapes. So if you get to the end of this one, you want to keep learning, I highly recommend checking out the next one. All right, that's enough of me talking. Let's jump into Xcode and get coding.
All right, welcome back everyone. I am back in our Xcode project. Let's right click the navigator, create a new file. This is going to be a SwiftUI view as always. And let's call this custom curves bootcamp. Go ahead and click create. So this is kind of going to be a continuation of the last video. The last video we started learning how to draw custom shapes, but we did not get into actual drawing curves and arcs and quad curves because they are a little bit more difficult and I wanted to cover them in a specific separate video. All right, so let's start this off. Down here underneath the preview. I'm going to start by creating a custom shape. Let's create a struct and let's call this arc sample. It will conform to shape, open the brackets. And every shape needs a path. Let's do path for path in. And here we can start drawing our shape. So if you were with me in the last video, we covered that this rectangle is basically just the entire frame of this object. And inside that rectangle, we can start drawing shapes or paths or lines or whatever we want. So what I'm going to do is move the cursor right into the center of the rectangle. So I'm going to say path.move. And let's go to CG point with the rect.midx and rect.midy. I'm going to put this arc sample on the screen here. So up here, let's start with just a rectangle and we're going to do a frame. Let's do 200 by 200. We don't need the alignment. Let's click resume, make sure it's connected. Should get a square. And now let's just put a arc sample instead of a rectangle. So right now all we did was move to the center of the rectangle. So if I click on this, I can see the rectangles here, and all we did was move the point right into the center. And we're doing that because this is a sample shape, and I just want to show you how arcs work. So next we're going to call path, instead of add line, we're going to call .add arc. And there's a bunch of completions here. We're going to focus on this third one here that has a center, a radius, starting and ending angle, and a clockwise Boolean. You can get into some of these other ones on your own time. There's a lot to play around with. So I'm going to put these on separate lines. And from where we are, we first need to decide where we want the center of this arc to be. So I'm just going to make the center of this arc exactly the same point where we are currently. So I'm going to copy that and paste that here. And then we need to decide the radius that we want this arc to be. So if you think about when we add like corner radiuses to views in SwiftUI, this is kind of the same thing. It's what radius do you want the curve to have? So I'm just going to make the radius half of the entire rectangle for now. So we'll do rect dot maybe height divided by 2. I know that the height and the width are going to be 200. So we could have used height or width here. It doesn't really matter. And I just did divided by 2. Then we have the starting angle and the ending angle. So let's start with the angle here. I'm going to use the degrees and let's just do 0. And then I'm going to do angle, degrees, and let's do 360. finally is, do we want to draw this clockwise or counterclockwise? And I'm just going to put false for clockwise here. So now we have a circle on the screen. So you might have not expected that, but what we did was draw a circle. So we put the center of this arc right in the center right here. And then we said make the radius exactly half, and that's why it's a perfect circle. We did the start angle of 0, so that's right over here, and then we said finish at 360. So it drew an entire circle 360 degrees, and now we basically are left with a circle. But if, for example, I made this degrees, let's do maybe -20, and maybe the end angle I do +20, we could now get, so if this is 0 right here, -20 is here, and +20 is here. So now we can get just this kind of arc on the edge here. I could then maybe reverse this, and instead of drawing clockwise from left to the right, I could draw counterclockwise from here all the way around to here. So if I switch this to true, it'll do the reverse. We'll kind of get like a Pac-Man effect. So what we're looking at here is actually just the arc that we're adding, and this is the arc on the edge here. And again, because this is a shape, we can do things like add a stroke to it. So I could do maybe like a line width of 5 here, and we just have the outer, and we have just the outer line. Obviously this doesn't look very good with the line coming from the center, so maybe I can move this point maybe to the edge of the circle and start at 0 or something like that. So we could do maybe rect.maxx, move it over there, and then start at 0 and end maybe 40, something like that. And now we've drawn just this curve here. So this is just a sample of how to use an arc, but now let's actually use it in a shape, because I think that will give a better understanding of how it works. So below this arc sample, we're going to create another struct. Let's call this shape with arc. Make it conform to shape, open brackets, and every shape needs a path. We're going to do path for path in. And let's start at the top left. So I'm going to do path.move, CG point. Let's do rect.minx, rect.miny. I'm going to call path.addLine2, and let's go CG point to the rect.maxx and rect.miny. So let's just put little comments here. So this will be the top left. This will be the top right. This will be the mid right. So I'm going to add a path.addLine CG point. Let's go rect.maxx and rect.midY. Let's go bottom here. So we're going to go path.addLine CG point. Let's go rect.midx and rect.maxy. So that's the bottom, and then I'm going to do a mid left. So we'll go path.addLine CG point x and y, rect.minx and rect.midy. Let's put this shape with arc on the screen here. So I'm going to put it up here. Click resume. So now we have this shape with arc. Let's get rid of the stroke so we can actually see what the shape looks like. All right, so we have the top left point, top right point, mid right, bottom, and mid left. This is a pretty basic shape, some sort of pentagon. I don't really know if this is a specific name, but what we want to do is basically, instead of having this as like a point at the bottom, a triangle, I want to make this bottom section here a big curve. So we're going to keep the top a square and have the bottom be a curve. So we're going to need an arc for this section down here. And so instead of just adding a line to this bottom point, we're going to add an arc. So I'm going to comment out this add line here. And then I'm going to say path.addArc. We're going to use that same completion here. Let's put these on different lines. The first question is, where should the center of the arc be? Well, we know the line before it is going to be this mid right side here, and it's going to end on this mid left side. So a good place to put the actual center of the arc would probably be right in the center. So I'm going to add a CG point here. Let's go rect.midx and rect.midy. Now I want this curve to be pretty much the entire way around here. And that's going to be exactly half of the entire shape. So again, I'm going to do rect.height divided by 2 for the radius. And then we have the start angle. So let's add an angle with degrees here. And I want to start exactly at 0. So it's 0 and then angle, open the parentheses, degrees here. So we want to go from 0 to the opposite side of the arc here. So if a full circle is 360, half of the circle is about 180. So let's do 180 here, and clockwise we can keep as false. And just like that, we now have an arc on the bottom of our shape. And if I want to compact this a little bit, maybe instead of putting the actual center right in the center here, maybe I can move it up a little bit. So for the center point for the Y, instead of just doing right in the middle, maybe we can do mid-Y minus something like 65 or something. Now we can get like a more natural looking curve here. So this is just one example of how we can add an arc into a shape. It does definitely take a little bit of playing around with to get the arc to be perfect. But overall, you can make some pretty cool custom shapes with this. I'm going to take the 65 off of here real quick. But if I took this arc and I just maybe called rotation effect and added an angle of maybe 90 degrees, we're not going to draw the whole thing, but you can see here this is exactly half of a capsule. So when we call like the capsule shape, behind the scenes, all Apple is really doing is drawing a shape just like we just drew. Obviously it's not half, it's going to be like the full capsule, which you could then work and draw yourself by literally just adding another arc. But you can now start to see where some of the actual built-in shapes come from and how they add these arcs to the ends of the shapes. I'm going to take the rotation effect off of here, and let's switch gears real quick away from arcs and into quad curves. So I'm going to create a struct. I'm going to call this quad sample, conform to shape, open the brackets. Every shape needs a path. We're going to go path for path in. I'm going to start by moving the cursor to the top left of the rect. So we're just going to go path.move to, and I could do CG point 0, 0, but there's actually a shorthand way of doing that and just calling dot 0. And then I'm going to call path.add quad curve. So we have 2 and control. I'm going to put these on separate lines here. And I'm going to draw this line from the top left to the bottom right. So 2 CG point. Let's go rect.maxx and rect.maxy. And then we have a control point, and I'm going to put that for now just right in the center of So let's do CG point, and let's do rect.midx and rect.midy. Let's put the quad sample on the screen. Click resume. And again, we can't actually see it because it's drawing a line from the top left to the bottom right, and it's like 0 pixels wide. But right now that control point is right in the center. If I move that control point maybe to the left a little bit, I'm going to move it to the down and left a little bit. So I'm going to say, let's move it to the bottom left first. So the control point, let's do min x and max y. If I move the control point down to the bottom left, so I'm going to again click on this, so we can see the entire frame here. We have the starting point, we have the ending point where we're going to, and then we have a control point that we added. Control point here is going to be down at the bottom. And you might be wondering, if we put the point down at the bottom, how come this curve is not actually going all the way to that point? And that's basically just how quad curves work. So if you just Google quad curves, how it works, this image will come up along with a bunch of other images. And basically what we have here is kind of what we have on the right here. So you have a starting point, you have an ending point, and then you set the control point. And what it does is it makes a curve between those 3 points. So that's why this curve here is what we're seeing on the screen. So we set the control point way in the back here, but it's making the best quadratic curve between those 3 points. So it's not always perfect, but a lot of times we don't need it to be an exact curve. We just want it to be a curve between the 2 points. And this quad curve definitely comes in handy. Let's play around with it a bit. So I'm going to move maybe the ending point to the center. So let's do 2. Let's go mid X and mid Y. And now if we keep the control on the bottom left, we're going to get this kind of funky curve. If we switch it maybe to the max X and the min Y, we could flip it to the other side. And then of course we can always customize it. If we want it to be like a smaller curve, we can maybe move it in a little bit. So we'll do max X minus 50 or something like that. We could do max Y maybe minus 100. You can play around with it to get the exact curve that you want and then connect it into the rest of your shape. So this was just a sample, but now let's actually create a shape with these quad curves. So down here, let's create one more struct, and we're going to call this water shape of type shape, open the brackets. We're going to create a path, and we're going to do path for path in. I'm going to start by moving the pointer down. Let's go path.move. Let's go to CG point, and we're going to do rect.minx and rect.midY. So we're going to go halfway down on the left side of the shape. And from there, we're going to then add a path.quad curve. So we're going to add this curve from this midpoint here to the center, the mid X. So we're going to go CG point, and we're going to do the rect.midx. And we're going to keep the same Y, so rect.midY. And I want to add a control point here with a CG point. And we're going to go with an X, which is going to be the rect.width times 0.25, and a Y with a rect.height times 0.25. Let's put the water shape on the screen here. Click resume. I don't think we're able to see anything just yet. Oh yeah, we can. So we're starting on the mid left here. And we're adding a quad curve to this mid center point, which is right in the center here. And we're setting the control point. And we're setting the control point to 25% of the width and 25% of the height. So the control point is actually somewhere right around here. And that's why this curve is pulling up, because the control point is like up here. I'm now going to add one more quad curve from here to the right side, and we're going to set the control point down here. So I'm going to copy and paste this quad curve. Let's go to the max X and mid Y, and let's change the CG point to times 0.75 and 0.75. So now we have the quad curve going in reverse. And let's just complete the shape. We're going to do path.addAlign to CG point. And let's go rect.maxx, rect.maxy. We're going to add one more line to the min x and max y. And let's go back up to our shape here. And let's take off this frame. Let's maybe make it .ignores safe area. So now we are like the full screen. This could be like a background. And let's also give it a .fill. Let's use maybe a linear gradient. We could do some colors here. I'm gonna do a color literal. Let's do like maybe a this blue, and then we're going to do a color literal. Let's do maybe a darker blue. From the top leading to the bottom trailing. We got some kind of like water theme going on here. And you can see how we drew this really custom shape. I think this is actually a little too drastic of a curve, so let's maybe move the control points down a little bit. So instead of 25% of the shape, let's make it closer to like, I don't know, 45% of the shape. So I'm gonna come down here and let's change the height from maybe 25% to like 40. And then we can change this down from 75% maybe to 60%. A slightly calmer curve that looks a little bit better. And I know this is not a perfect water shape, but this was just an example of how you can use a quad curve and incorporate that into your actual shapes. And again, because they're shapes, we can do really cool things like fill them, add strokes, we can trim them, and we can even crop images into this shape. Alright, so that is it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed learning about arcs and quad curves. I definitely recommend going and trying to create custom shapes on your own, just in a playground, and just practice it a little bit, because getting used to how these curves work can definitely be a challenge if you've never done it before. But once you do it a couple times, you'll start to get used to it. One thing I do want to point out though is that we have not animated any of these custom shapes. So if we wanted to animate any of the lines in these shapes, there's a very specific way that we need to do that in SwiftUI. And if you stick around for the next video, that is what we're going to get into. It's called animatable data. So that's it for this one, and thank you guys for watching. As always, I'm Nick, this is Swiftful Thinking, and I'll see you in the next video.